A great scientific day, grade 4 student. Once again, we are here in our scientific class with Miss Shara. Let us read our work plan for today. First, science bits, recall, discussion, then we'll have an activity and phase to 5. Right, for our science bits, bats have been known to care for the young of other species of bats. The smallest mammal in the world is a species of bat, the bumblebee bat from Thailand. The bumblebee bat weighs less than a penny. Wow, that's very small. The largest species of bat, the flying foxes, is known to have a 6-foot wingspan. So some bats feed on fish, frogs, small mammals, fruit, and insects. Some bats are even cannibalistic and have been known to feed on other bats. There are 3 species of bat that feed on blood. All 3 are only found in Central and South America. So that is for our science bits about bats and related to our lesson, which is also about bats. Before we start our lesson, let's have a game. Guess the riddle. So my question is, what animal is always present at baseball game? That's right, it's a bat. The next riddle is, what animal is called by husbands as sweet? Correct. It's a bee. Sometimes your mommy or your daddy will call the other be. Be. It's a bee. So these 2 answers from the riddle, the bat and the bee, are our lesson for today. Let me read our learning targets for today. I can describe the life cycle of a bee and a bat. Today's lesson covered is about the life cycle of bat and bee. Let us start with the life cycle of a bat. Bats are ancient. They have been around for at least 50 million years. Despite this extended period of time, bats today look much like their ancient ancestor. The various species of bats make up about 25% of all mammals. They are the only mammals that can fly. The scientific order to which bats belong is Chiroptera, which means hand wing. Contrary to popular belief, bats are incredibly gentle creature who rarely bites. They are only aggressive when they are frightened or provoked. Many species of bats are considered keystone species. They are essential to the survival of their habitats. Bat droppings are called guano. It makes an excellent fertilizer. Some countries actually mine guano to use for that purpose. Bats generally have excellent eyesight, like humans, though they can't see too well at night. They typically rely on sound and echolocation to find their way in the dark. This ability also comes in handy for hunting. Bats live relatively long lives. Some species can live up to and even past 30 years. In fact, the oldest recorded bat was discovered in Russia. This particular Myotis brandti was caught at 41 years old. In the US, there are 45 known species of bats. At least 6 of them can be found on the endangered species list. Bats are essential part of an ecosystem in which they are found. We should do our best to ensure the continued survival of bats. But what is the life cycle of a bat? Recently, bats have been swarming together in large numbers to breed. Females generally give birth to only one offspring per year in summer, due to the mother's need to fly while pregnant and nurse their youngster until it has grown nearly to adult size. This does not take long as pups are a third of the size of the mother when born. Female bats use a variety of strategies to control the timing of pregnancy and the birth of young, and can even pause the pregnancy when the insects are scarce or when there are no food. So the first is giving birth to a pup. Pups are born alive after 50 to 60 days in their mother's body. Bat pups or baby bats. Baby bats are called pups. Are taken care of in a nursery when the mother bat is hunting. So this is the nursery stage. They use their teeth and claws to hold on to their mother. They can start to fly at 2 to 3 months of age. So until they are 3 months, they cling to their mother for food and nourishment. The bat is an adult around the age of 1 year. So 1 year old, they are already an adult. So let's go over to the life cycle of a bat. So at first, birth. So they will stay there for 50 to 60 days inside their mommy's tummy, and then they will give birth. Okay, and then the next stage is nursery stage where they need to cling to their mothers for 2 to 3 months for food and nourishment, or they are put in a nursery area. And then from 3 months up to 11 months, that is the young bat. They learn how to fly, they learn how to get their own food. And the next stage is adult, right? So this is 1 year old. At 1 year old, the bat is already an adult and then it will give birth. So the process begins again. The next one is the sweetest name, Be. Bee, the bee. So the bee undergoes complete metamorphosis, but the adult takes care of its young. So last time we talked about complete metamorphosis. Now let's talk about the life cycle of a bee. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 six stages. Before we move on, let's classify some of the bees. Okay, so how are we going to identify each bees? Okay, so we have the drone, the queen, and the worker. If you will look at their feathers, okay, so the drone has different feathers from the queen, and so is the worker. So drone is longer, the worker is shorter, and the queen has big black color on its back. So drone, queen, worker. We are going to hear lots of this word as we talk about the life cycle of a bee. Okay, there are some questions that we need to answer. Can a worker bee become a queen? Genetically, a worker bee does not differ from a queen bee and can even become a laying worker bee. But in most species, it will produce only male or drone offspring. So drone means the male bee. Whether a larva becomes a worker or a queen depends on the kind of food it is given after the first 3 days of its larval form. Next, what happens when a queen bee dies? So sometimes a hive becomes weak because it lost its queen and eventually the bees will die. So what happens when the queen bee dies? If they are queenless too long, a worker may start laying. Since she is not fertile, she will only lay drone eggs. How does royal jelly make queen bees? Royal jelly is harvested by stimulating colonies with movable frame hives to produce queen bees. Royal jelly is collected from each individual queen cell or honeycomb. When the queen larvae are about 4 days old, sometimes honey or beeswax is added to the royal jelly, which is thought to aid its preservation. How do they decide who is the queen bee? So the bees decide to swarm. Example, take one hive and split it into two. In all of these situations, the bees need a new queen. So they choose female eggs, apparently at random, and relocate them into bigger cells, queen cells. The cells are then capped. The larvae create pupa and transform into queens. Is there a queen bee? Is there a king bee? Okay. The drone bees are the males of the colony, with the singular task of fertilizing the queen bee. They lack the structure to collect nectar or protect the hive and are usually starved during food shortage. They are the closest thing to a king bee you'll ever find. So the one that fertilized the queen bee is the king bee. So let us watch a short video about from one queen to the next. So there are 10 stages of a queen. We are talking about queen bee, but what is the task of a queen bee? Inside the beehive is the queen bee. A bee becomes a queen bee thanks to the effort of the existing worker bees in the hive. A young larvae, newly hatched baby insect, is fed special food called royal jelly by the worker bees. Royal jelly is richer than the food given to the worker larva and is necessary for the larva to develop into a fertile queen bee. So who is this queen bee? The queen bee is the mother of all baby bees. This is the one that lays eggs. So this is where the life cycle of the bee starts. Honeybee eggs are laid in wax honeycombs. The bees will eventually become either drones or sterile female worker bees. When the eggs are laid, the queen bee can either choose to fertilize the egg or not. And that's what decides what case the bee will belong to. The case is the social structures that all honeybees follow, with each hive members having specific responsibilities they follow in order for the hive to run smoothly. So there is a system. Drones are slightly larger than the worker bees and so requires a larger cell. Fertilized egg become female working worker bees, while unfertilized eggs become drones. So like other insects, bees are able to lay large numbers of eggs in a short period of time. In fact, one queen bee can lay up to an average of 1,500 eggs a day. So if you will look at the video, here is a better view of the eggs. Eggs are translucent, white, and oblong, so inside the circle. 3 days after bee eggs are laid, they hatch, and the bees enter the larval stage. Bee larvae are small and white, growing rapidly. In fact, they shed their skin 5 times during this stage in the bee life cycle. The larvae are essentially helpless, without legs or even eyes. They remain in the same cells where they hatch from the egg and have to rely on worker bees to feed them. Bee larvae have voracious appetites and eat continuously throughout the day. First, they start on a meal of royal jelly produced by nurse bees. Queen bees also fed on this same jelly. After a period of time, larvae go from eating royal jelly to eating a mixture of honey and pollen. After approximately 5 days of nonstop eating and growing, honeybee larvae are sealed in their cells with wax for the next stage. A worker bee cares for the growing larvae. Soon, some of these babies will become worker. Male bees are called drones. Within their sealed cell, the larvae enter the pupal stage of the bee life cycle. During the pupa stage, what was a small white larva starts to develop into the honeybee that you would recognize. The wings, legs, and eyes form. After just over a week, the new adult bee chews its way out of the wax covering of its cells to enter the hive. The case of honeybee determines how long the bee takes to develop in its pupal stage. Drones take the longest to develop in their pupal stage, followed by female worker bees, followed finally by the queen bee. And then we have the adult stage. So the adult crawls out of the shell. Adult honeybees emerge from their cells knowing exactly what their role will be in the hive. The strict caste system is why honeybees are able to function so efficiently. The caste of the adult honeybee also determines what size they'll be. Queen bees are the largest at around 3/4 of an inch, followed by drone bees and worker bees. Those are usually around half an inch in size. So let's go over again to the life cycle of a bee or a honeybee. It will start with the egg. So the queen bee will lay the egg. It will turn into larva that continuously eat and grows big, and then it hardens and becomes pupa. From pupal stage, it will turn into adult. So during the pupal stage, it will determine whether it's a worker bee, a drone, or a queen bee. So while bees are necessary to life on Earth, and honeybees in particular are extremely important because of their ability to pollinate, they can pose a danger if threatened, especially to those that are allergic. So sometimes you're afraid of bees. They are very small, but we're afraid of them. People that are allergic to bee stings can react in just few minutes. Bees can be dangerous if threatened, but there are suggested guidelines to avoid stings since honeybees are important pollinators. Okay, so if you happen to get stung by a bee, you just look for the ways on how to treat them properly because bees are important to our ecosystem, to pollination. They are pollinators. Another scientific day has passed. We talk about the bats and the bees. So, a big thank you to everyone. This is an amazing day. You see, it doesn't matter how you look like or how an animal looks like. A bat is very important in our ecosystem as well as the bee because they are agents of pollination. They pollinate the flowers, which is necessary for reproduction. So let's not be afraid of them. Instead, let us help in preserving these little animals. So once again, this is Miss Shara saying goodbye and thank you. See you next time.